The sun was shining brightly on the first day of school, and the air was filled with the usual mix of excitement and nervousness. Students chatted loudly, catching up after the summer break, while others hurried to find their classrooms. Among the crowd was a new face, a quiet girl with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor. She stood out not because she was loud or flashy, but because she carried herself with a quiet confidence that seemed unusual for someone her age. She had just moved to town with her father, who had recently taken up a new job. The girl wasn't one to talk much about her family, but she knew her dad's new role was important. He was the new chief of police, a position that came with a lot of responsibility. She admired him deeply but didn't feel the need to brag about it. To her, it was just another day, another school, and another chance to start fresh. As she walked through the hallways, she couldn't help but notice the whispers and glances. Being the new kid always drew attention, but she tried to ignore it. She found her classroom, took a seat near the back, and quietly observed her surroundings. The teacher introduced her to the class, and she gave a small, polite smile. Most of the students seemed friendly enough, but there was one girl who immediately caught her attention. This girl had a group of friends around her, laughing loudly and making jokes at others' expense. She seemed to be the leader of the pack, the kind of person who thrived on attention and didn't care who she stepped on to get it. The new girl quickly realized that this was someone who enjoyed being in control, and she made a mental note to stay out of her way. But staying out of the way wasn't going to be easy. During lunch, the new girl found a quiet spot to sit and eat. She was minding her own business when the loud girl from class walked over with her friends. They stood around her table, smirking and exchanging glances. "So, you're the new girl, huh?" the loud girl said, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "What's your name? Or should we just call you Newbie?" The new girl looked up, her expression calm but firm. "You can call me by my name," she said simply, refusing to engage in the taunting. The loud girl raised an eyebrow, clearly not used to being brushed off so easily. "Ooh, someone's got an attitude," she said, turning to her friends for backup. They giggled, but the new girl didn't react. She just went back to eating her lunch, ignoring the group. This only seemed to annoy the loud girl more. She leaned in closer, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "You think you're too good to talk to us? You better watch yourself, Newbie. This is my school, and I don't like people who don't know their place." The new girl looked up again, her eyes steady. "I'm just here to learn, like everyone else," she said calmly. "I'm not looking for trouble." The loud girl snorted. "Well, trouble found you. You'll learn soon enough." With that, she walked away, her friends trailing behind her, laughing and whispering. The new girl sighed quietly but didn't let it bother her. She had dealt with bullies before, and she knew how to handle herself. What she didn't know, however, was that this particular bully had no idea who she was messing with. As the days went by, the loud girl continued to target the new girl, making snide comments, spreading rumors, and trying to isolate her from the other students. But the new girl remained unfazed. She didn't retaliate or stoop to their level. Instead, she focused on her studies and kept to herself, waiting for the right moment to stand up for herself. Meanwhile, at home, her father noticed that something was bothering her. He was a perceptive man, and he could tell when his daughter was holding something back. One evening, as they sat down for dinner, he gently asked her how school was going. She hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's fine," she said, but her tone gave her away. Her father put down his fork and looked at her carefully. "You know you can talk to me, right? If something's wrong, I'm here." She nodded, grateful for his support. "I know, Dad. It's just, there's this girl at school. She's been giving me a hard time." Her father's expression grew serious. "Bullying is never okay. Have you told anyone at school about it?" "Not yet," she admitted. I don't want to make a big deal out of it. I can handle it. Her father studied her for a moment, then nodded. I trust you to know what's best. But remember, you don't have to face everything alone. If it gets worse, let me know. She smiled, feeling a little lighter. Thanks, Dad. Little did they both know, the situation at school was about to take a turn that no one could have predicted. The loud girl had no idea who she was dealing with, not just a girl who could stand her ground, but the daughter of the new chief of police. And when the truth came out, it would change everything. The loud girl, whose name was Ria, had made it her mission to make the new girl's life miserable. She didn't like how calm and unbothered the new girl seemed, and it irked her that her usual tactics weren't working. Ria was used to people either cowering or lashing out, but the new girl did neither. She simply carried on, refusing to give Ria the reaction she craved. One afternoon, during gym class, Ria saw her chance to escalate things. The class was playing basketball, and the new girl was on the opposing team. Ria smirked as she dribbled the ball down the court, her eyes locked on her target. As the new girl moved to block her, Ria accidentally elbowed her hard in the ribs, sending her stumbling backward. The gym teacher blew the whistle, but Ria immediately put on an innocent face. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. It was an accident, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. The new girl straightened up, wincing slightly but keeping her composure. It's fine, she said quietly, brushing it off. Ria's friends snickered, and the game continued. But Ria wasn't done. A few minutes later, she tripped and knocked the new girl to the ground again. This time, the teacher intervened. Ria, that's enough. Be careful out there, the teacher warned, though it was clear she didn't fully grasp what was happening. Ria shrugged, pretending to look apologetic. Sorry, coach. I guess I'm just really into the game. The new girl got back up, her knees scraped and her patience wearing thin. She knew Ria was doing this on purpose, but she also knew that reacting would only make things worse. She took a deep breath and decided to focus on finishing the game without giving Ria the satisfaction of seeing her upset. After class, as the students headed to the locker rooms, Ria cornered the new girl near the water fountain. You're tougher than you look, she said with a sneer. But don't think that means you've won. This is just the beginning. The new girl met Ria's gaze, her expression calm but firm. I'm not trying to win anything, she said. I'm just here to get through the day. Why are you so obsessed with me? Ria's eyes narrowed. Obsessed? Don't flatter yourself. I just don't like people who think they're better than everyone else. I don't think I'm better than anyone, the new girl replied. But I also don't think I'm worse. Maybe you should try it sometime. Ria's face flushed with anger, but before she could respond, one of her friends called her over. Come on, Ria, let's go. She's not worth it. Ria shot the new girl one last glare before walking away. The new girl sighed, feeling a mix of frustration and relief. She knew this wasn't over, but she also knew she couldn't let Ria get to her. That evening, as she sat at the kitchen table doing her homework, her father noticed the scrapes on her knees. What happened? He asked, his voice tinged with concern. Just a rough gym class, she replied, not looking up from her book. Her father frowned. Are you sure? You know you can tell me if something's going on. She hesitated, then decided to be honest. There's this girl at school. She's been difficult. But I can handle it. Her father sat down across from her, his expression serious. Bullying isn't something you should have to handle on your own. Have you talked to your teacher about it? Not yet, she admitted. I don't want to make it a bigger deal than it already is. Her father nodded slowly. I get that. But sometimes, standing up for yourself means asking for help. Just promise me you'll let me know if it gets worse, okay? She smiled faintly. Okay, Dad. I promise. The next day at school, Ria seemed to have doubled down on her efforts. She spread rumors about the new girl, saying she was a snob who thought she was too good for everyone. She even convinced a few classmates to exclude her from group projects and lunch tables. But the new girl refused to let it break her. She focused on her work, stayed polite to everyone, and avoided Ria as much as possible. Deep down, though, she knew she couldn't keep ignoring the problem. Something had to give. One afternoon, as she was walking home from school, she noticed Ria and her friends following her. They kept their distance at first, but as she turned down a quieter street, they quickened their pace. Hey, newbie! Ria called out, her voice sharp and mocking. Where are you going in such a hurry? Afraid of us? The new girl stopped and turned to face them, her heart pounding but her expression calm. What do you want, Ria? Ria smirked, stepping closer. I just want to make sure you know your place. This is my town, my school, and my rules. You don't get to come in here and act like you're better than me. The new girl took a deep breath, her mind racing. She knew she couldn't fight back physically, and she didn't want to. But she also knew she couldn't keep running away. I'm not trying to be better than anyone, she said, her voice steady. But I'm also not going to let you push me around. If you have a problem with me, that's your issue, not mine. Ria's smirk faltered for a moment, but then she laughed. Oh, you're brave, I'll give you that. But let's see how brave you are when you're all alone. With that, Ria and her friends walked away, leaving the new girl standing there, her hands trembling but her resolve stronger than ever. She knew she couldn't keep this to herself anymore. It was time to take a stand, not just for herself, but for anyone else Ria might target in the future. The tension at school was becoming unbearable. Ria's bullying had escalated from snide comments and rumors to outright sabotage. One day, the new girl found her locker vandalized with cruel messages scrawled in marker. Another day, her homework was stolen, leaving her scrambling to complete it before class. Despite it all, the new girl kept her composure. She didn't cry or lash out, but inside, she was growing angrier and more frustrated. She knew she couldn't keep ignoring the problem, but she also didn't want to give Ria the satisfaction of seeing her break. One afternoon, during a group project in science class, things came to a head. The teacher had assigned students to work in pairs, and by some cruel twist of fate, the new girl was paired with Ria. Ria smirked as she slid into the seat next to her. Looks like we're partners, she said, her tone dripping with mock sweetness. This should be fun. The new girl forced a polite smile, determined not to let Ria get under her skin. Let's just get this done, she said, opening her notebook. But Ria had no intention of working. She spent the entire period making snide comments, doodling on the assignment sheet, and distracting the new girl with constant chatter. When the teacher walked by to check on their progress, Ria suddenly put on a show of being helpful, leaving the new girl to explain why they had nothing to show for their time. We're still brainstorming, the new girl said, her voice tight with frustration. The teacher raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Make sure you have something to present by the end of class, she said before moving on. As soon as the teacher was out of earshot, Ria leaned back in her chair, smirking. Looks like you're not as smart as you think you are, she said. The new girl clenched her fists under the table, her patience wearing thin. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice low but firm. Ria shrugged. Because I can. And because it's fun to watch you squirm. That was the final straw. The new girl stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm done playing your games, she said, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of the entire class. Ria's smirk faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. Oh, what are you going to do? Cry to the teacher? Go ahead. No one's going to believe you. The new girl took a deep breath, her heart pounding but her resolve unwavering. "I'm not going to cry," she said. "But I'm also not going to let you keep treating me like this. You think you're untouchable, but you're not." Ria laughed, but it sounded forced. Big words for someone who's all alone. The new girl didn't respond. Instead, she gathered her things and walked out of the classroom, leaving Ria and the rest of the class staring after her in stunned silence. As she made her way to the principal's office, she felt a mix of fear and relief. She knew this wasn't going to be easy, but she also knew it was the right thing to do. She couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. It was time to take a stand, not just for herself, but for anyone else Ria might target in the future. The new girl sat outside the principal's office, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She could hear muffled voices inside, but her mind was racing too fast to focus on them. She had never been one to cause trouble or draw attention to herself, but today, she had no choice. Ria's bullying had gone too far, and she couldn't stay silent any longer. When the principal's door finally opened, a kind-looking woman with glasses stepped out and smiled at her. "Come in, dear," she said gently. "Let's talk." The new girl followed her inside and sat down in the chair across from the desk. The principal, Mrs. Kapoor, took her seat and folded her hands on the desk. "Now, tell me what's going on," she said in a calm, reassuring tone. For a moment, the new girl hesitated. She wasn't used to talking about her problems, especially to someone she barely knew. But then she thought about everything she had been through, the rumors, the sabotage, the constant harassment, and she knew she had to speak up. "It's Ria," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "She's been bullying me since I started here. She spreads rumors about me, ruins my schoolwork, and even vandalized my locker. Today, she sabotaged our group project and made it look like it was my fault." Mrs. Kapoor listened carefully, her expression growing more serious as the new girl spoke. "I see," she said when the girl finished. "This is a very serious matter, and I'm glad you came to me. No one should have to go through what you've been dealing with." The new girl nodded, feeling a small sense of relief. But then Mrs. Kapoor asked a question that made her stomach drop. "Have you told anyone else about this? Your parents, perhaps?" The new girl hesitated. She hadn't told her father everything, not wanting to worry him. But now, she realized that keeping it from him might have been a mistake. I told my dad a little bit," she admitted. "But I didn't want to make it a big deal." Mrs. Kapoor gave her a sympathetic smile. "I understand. But sometimes, these things are a big deal, and it's important to involve the people who care about you. Would you like me to call your father and let him know what's going on?" The new girl thought for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, please." Mrs. Kapoor picked up the phone and dialed the number the new girl provided. When her father answered, the principal explained the situation in a calm, professional manner. The new girl couldn't hear what he was saying, but she could tell from Mrs. Kapoor's expression that he was taking it seriously. "Your father is on his way," Mrs. Kapoor said after hanging up. "In the meantime, I'll speak with Ria and get her side of the story. But I want you to know that we take bullying very seriously here, and we will do everything we can to make sure this stops." The new girl nodded, feeling a mix of emotions, relief, anxiety, and even a little fear. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew she had done the right thing. A short while later, her father arrived at the school. He looked worried but calm as he entered the principal's office. Mrs. Kapoor explained the situation again, and her father listened intently, his expression growing darker with every word. When the principal finished, her father turned to her, his voice gentle but firm. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" he asked. The new girl looked down at her hands, feeling a lump in her throat. "I didn't want to bother you," she said quietly. "You have so much going on with your new job, and I thought I could handle it." Her father sighed and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're my daughter. Your problems are my problems. No matter how busy I am, I'll always make time for you. Understand?" She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she wasn't alone. Mrs. Kapoor cleared her throat gently. "I'll call Ria and her parents in for a meeting tomorrow," she said. "We'll get to the bottom of this and make sure it doesn't happen again." The new girl and her father thanked the principal and left the office. As they walked to the car, her father put an arm around her shoulders. "You did the right thing," he said. "I'm proud of you." She smiled faintly, feeling a small sense of hope. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Ria wasn't the type to back down easily, and the new girl couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get even more complicated. The next day, the atmosphere at school was tense. Word had spread quickly about the new girl's visit to the principal's office, and everyone seemed to be waiting to see what would happen next. Ria, for her part, acted as if nothing was wrong. She walked through the hallways with her usual swagger, laughing loudly with her friends and shooting the new girl smug glances. But the new girl didn't let it get to her. She kept her head down, focusing on her classes and avoiding any unnecessary interactions. She knew the meeting with Ria and her parents was scheduled for after school, and she tried to prepare herself for what was to come. When the final bell rang, she made her way to the principal's office, where her father was already waiting. He gave her a reassuring smile and squeezed her hand. "It's going to be okay," he said. "We'll handle this together." A few minutes later, Ria arrived with her parents. Her mother was dressed in an expensive-looking suit, her expression cold and unreadable, while her father looked bored, as if he'd rather be anywhere else. Ria herself looked annoyed, rolling her eyes as she slumped into a chair. Mrs. Kapoor began the meeting by explaining the situation. "We're here to discuss some serious allegations of bullying," she said, her tone firm but fair. "The new girl has reported that Ria has been harassing her since she started at this school. This includes spreading rumors, sabotaging her schoolwork, and even vandalizing her locker." Ria's mother raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "And do you have any proof of these allegations?" she asked, her voice sharp. Mrs. Kapoor nodded. "We've spoken to several students who have witnessed Ria's behavior. We've also seen the vandalism on the locker and the incomplete group project that Ria sabotaged." Ria's father scoffed. "Kids will be kids," he said dismissively. "This seems like a lot of fuss over nothing." The new girl's father, who had been silent until now, leaned forward, his expression serious. "This isn't nothing," he said, his voice calm but firm. "My daughter has been through a lot because of your child's actions. Bullying is never okay, and it needs to stop." Ria's mother narrowed her eyes. "And who are you, exactly?" The new girl's father straightened up, his tone steady. "I'm the new chief of police," he said. "And I take matters like this very seriously." The room fell silent. Ria's parents exchanged a glance, their expressions shifting from dismissive to uneasy. Even Ria looked surprised, her smug demeanor faltering for the first time. Mrs. Kapoor cleared her throat, breaking the tension. "Regardless of who is involved, the fact remains that Ria's behavior is unacceptable. We have a zero-tolerance policy for bullying at this school, and there will be consequences." Ria's mother opened her mouth to argue, but her husband placed a hand on her arm, stopping her. "We'll talk to Ria," he said, his tone much more subdued. "This won't happen again." Mrs. Kapoor nodded. "I'm glad to hear that. Ria will also be required to attend counseling sessions and complete community service. If there are any further incidents, the consequences will be more severe." Ria crossed her arms, looking sullen but not saying a word. Her parents nodded reluctantly, clearly unhappy but unwilling to argue further. As the meeting ended, the new girl felt a mix of emotions, relief, satisfaction, and even a little apprehension. She knew Ria wasn't going to change overnight, but at least now, the school was aware of the problem and taking steps to address it. As they left the office, her father put an arm around her shoulders. "You did the right thing," he said. "I'm proud of you." She smiled faintly, feeling a small sense of hope. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Ria wasn't the type to back down easily, and the new girl couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get even more complicated. The days following the meeting were tense. Ria's punishment had been made clear, but her attitude hadn't changed much. She still walked through the hallways with her head held high, though her usual swagger seemed a little forced. She avoided direct confrontation with the new girl, but the glares and whispered comments continued. The new girl, however, felt a small sense of relief. Knowing that the school was aware of the situation and that her father had her back gave her the strength to keep going. She focused on her studies and tried to ignore the lingering tension. One afternoon, as she was leaving school, she noticed Ria and her friends huddled near the gate, talking in low voices. They stopped when they saw her, and Ria shot her a cold stare. The new girl hesitated for a moment, then decided to walk past them without saying a word. But as she passed, Ria muttered something under her breath. "Think you're so special just because your dad's the chief. You're still just a nobody." The new girl stopped in her tracks, her heart pounding. She turned to face Ria, her expression calm but firm. "I don't think I'm special," she said. "But I do know that I don't deserve to be treated like this. And neither does anyone else." Ria's friends exchanged uneasy glances, but Ria just rolled her eyes. "Whatever. You're not worth my time." With that, she turned and walked away, her friends trailing behind her. The new girl watched them go, feeling a mix of frustration and sadness. She had hoped that the meeting would make Ria realize the impact of her actions, but it seemed like nothing had changed. That evening, as she sat at the kitchen table doing her homework, her father noticed her troubled expression. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then decided to be honest. "It's Ria," she said. "I thought things would get better after the meeting, but she's still the same. I don't know what to do." Her father sat down across from her, his expression thoughtful. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said. "Sometimes, people need time to realize the consequences of their actions. But that doesn't mean you should give up." She nodded, feeling a little reassured. "I just wish there was something more I could do." Her father smiled faintly. "You've already done a lot by standing up for yourself. Sometimes, that's the hardest part." The next day at school, the new girl decided to take her father's advice and focus on the positive. She joined a study group with some classmates who had been friendly to her, and she even volunteered to help organize a school event. Slowly but surely, she began to feel more connected to the school and the people around her. But Ria's presence still loomed large. One afternoon, as the new girl was leaving the library, she found Ria waiting for her in the hallway. "We need to talk," Ria said, her tone uncharacteristically serious. The new girl hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." Ria led her to a quiet corner, away from prying eyes. For a moment, she just stood there, her arms crossed and her expression conflicted. Finally, she spoke. "Look, I'm not saying I was wrong," she began, her voice defensive. "But I guess I didn't realize how much of a big deal this was. My parents are really mad at me, and I'm stuck doing all this extra stuff because of you." The new girl raised an eyebrow. "Because of me?" Ria sighed, looking frustrated. "Okay, fine. Because of what I did. But I just want you to know that I'm not going to bother you anymore. So can we just forget about it?" The new girl studied her for a moment, then shook her head. "I'm glad you're not going to bother me anymore. But I can't just forget about it. What you did was wrong, and it hurt a lot of people. If you really want to make things right, you need to do more than just stop. Ria's expression darkened, but she didn't argue. Instead, she just nodded and walked away, leaving the new girl standing there, feeling a mix of emotions. She knew this wasn't the end of the story, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. The weeks that followed were quieter, at least on the surface. Ria kept her distance, no longer making snide comments or trying to sabotage the new girl's work. But the tension between them was still palpable, like a storm waiting to break. The new girl, however, was determined to move forward. She threw herself into her studies and extracurricular activities, finding solace in the routine of school life. She even started to make a few friends, students who admired her quiet strength and resilience. One day, during lunch, she was sitting with a small group of classmates when one of them brought up Ria. "I heard she got in trouble with the principal again," the boy said, lowering his voice. "Something about skipping her counseling sessions." The new girl frowned. She hadn't heard about that, but it didn't surprise her. Ria had always been stubborn, and it seemed like she wasn't ready to change. "Do you think she'll ever stop being so mean?" another girl asked, glancing at the new girl. The new girl shrugged. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'm not going to let her behavior control my life anymore. I've got better things to focus on." Her friends nodded, clearly impressed by her attitude. And for the first time in a long while, the new girl felt like she was truly starting to belong. But the peace didn't last long. One afternoon, as she was walking home from school, she noticed Ria sitting on a bench near the park. She looked different, smaller, somehow, and less sure of herself. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by a look of frustration and defeat. The new girl hesitated, then decided to approach her. "Hey," she said cautiously. Ria looked up, her expression wary. "What do you want?" "I just wanted to see if you're okay," the new girl said, sitting down beside her. Ria snorted. "Why do you care? I've been nothing but horrible to you." The new girl shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe because I know what it's like to feel alone." Ria didn't respond at first. She just stared at the ground, her hands clenched into fists. Finally, she spoke. "I'm failing all my classes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My parents are furious, and the school says I might have to repeat the year if I don't get my act together." The new girl felt a pang of sympathy, though she tried not to show it. "That's tough," she said. "But it's not too late to turn things around." Ria laughed bitterly. "Easy for you to say. You're perfect. You've got everything figured out." The new girl shook her head. "I'm not perfect. And I definitely don't have everything figured out. But I do know that it's never too late to make a change." Ria looked at her for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she sighed and stood up. "Thanks, I guess," she said, though her tone was still guarded. "But I don't need your pity." With that, she walked away, leaving the new girl sitting on the bench, feeling a mix of emotions. She knew Ria wasn't ready to accept help, but she also knew that reaching out was the right thing to do. As she walked home, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to change, not just for Ria, but for both of them. The next few days were a blur. Ria's absence from school became noticeable, and rumors began to swirl. Some said she had been suspended, while others claimed she had dropped out entirely. The new girl tried not to pay attention to the gossip, but she couldn't help feeling a little worried. One afternoon, as she was leaving school, she noticed Ria's mother waiting by the gate. She looked tired and stressed, her usual polished appearance replaced by a disheveled look. When she saw the new girl, she hesitated, then approached her. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" she asked, her voice strained. The new girl nodded, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Of course. Ria's mother led her to a quiet corner, away from the crowd of students. "I know my daughter hasn't been kind to you," she began, her tone hesitant. "But I'm worried about her. She's been skipping school, and she won't talk to me or her father. I was hoping you might know what's going on." The new girl hesitated, unsure of how much to say. "I don't know much," she admitted. "But I did talk to her a few days ago. She seemed upset. She said she was failing her classes and that her parents were angry with her." Ria's mother sighed, her expression pained. "We are angry, but only because we care. We want her to succeed, but she's been so difficult lately. I don't know what to do." The new girl felt a pang of sympathy. Despite everything, she could see that Ria's mother genuinely cared about her daughter. "Maybe she just needs someone to listen to her," she suggested. "Without judgment, I mean." Ria's mother looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're very wise for your age," she said, her voice softening. "Thank you for talking to me." The new girl smiled faintly. "I hope things get better." As Ria's mother walked away, the new girl felt a sense of hope. She didn't know if her words would make a difference, but she knew she had done what she could. The next day, Ria returned to school. She looked different, quieter, more subdued. She didn't approach the new girl or try to cause trouble. Instead, she kept to herself, focusing on her work and avoiding the usual crowd of friends. The new girl noticed the change but didn't comment on it. She knew Ria had to figure things out on her own, and she didn't want to push her. But then, one afternoon, Ria approached her after class. "Can we talk?" she asked, her tone hesitant. The new girl nodded, feeling a mix of curiosity and caution. "Sure." Ria led her to a quiet corner, away from prying eyes. For a moment, she just stood there, her arms crossed and her expression conflicted. Finally, she spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began, her voice quiet. "About how it's never too late to make a change. And I think you're right." The new girl raised an eyebrow, surprised but not wanting to interrupt. Ria took a deep breath, her tone growing more determined. "I've been a jerk, and I know that. I've hurt a lot of people, including you. And I'm sorry." The new girl felt a lump in her throat, but she kept her expression calm. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "It means a lot." Ria nodded, looking relieved but still uneasy. "I don't expect you to forgive me or anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better." The new girl smiled faintly. "That's all anyone can ask for." For the first time, Ria smiled back, a small, tentative smile, but a genuine one. "Thanks," she said. "For not giving up on me." The new girl nodded, feeling a sense of hope. She knew this wasn't the end of the story, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. The weeks that followed were a time of change, not just for Ria, but for the entire school. Ria's apology had been a turning point, and while it didn't erase everything that had happened, it opened the door for something new. Ria began to take her studies seriously, showing up to class on time and even asking for help when she needed it. She stopped hanging out with the group of friends who had encouraged her bad behavior and instead started spending time with students who shared her newfound focus. It wasn't easy for her, old habits die hard, but she was determined to prove that she could change. The new girl, for her part, was proud of Ria's progress. She didn't pretend that they were suddenly best friends, but she appreciated the effort Ria was making. Slowly but surely, the tension between them faded, replaced by a quiet mutual respect. One afternoon, as the new girl was leaving school, Ria caught up to her. "Hey," she said, her tone hesitant but friendly. "I just wanted to say thanks. For giving me a chance, I mean." The new girl smiled. "You're welcome. I'm glad things are going better for you." Ria nodded, looking more at ease than she had in months. Yeah, me too. It's not perfect, but it's a start. The two of them walked together for a while, talking about school and their plans for the future. It was a simple conversation, but it felt significant, a small step toward healing the wounds of the past. When they reached the gate, Ria hesitated, then turned to the new girl. I know I can't change what happened, she said, her voice sincere. But I want you to know that I'm really sorry. For everything. The new girl nodded, feeling a lump in her throat. I know. And I forgive you. Ria smiled, looking relieved. Thanks. That means a lot. As they parted ways, the new girl felt a sense of closure. She knew that life would always have its challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. She had stood up for herself, shown kindness when it wasn't easy, and helped someone find their way back from a dark place. That evening, as she sat at the kitchen table with her father, she told him everything that had happened. He listened quietly, his expression thoughtful. When she finished, he smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. I'm proud of you, he said. Not just for standing up for yourself, but for showing compassion when it mattered most. That's not always easy to do. The new girl smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Thanks, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you. Her father shook his head. You're stronger than you think. And I have a feeling this is just the beginning for you. As she went to bed that night, the new girl thought about his words. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she was ready to face it, with courage, kindness, and an open heart. And so, the story came to an end, not with a dramatic showdown, but with a quiet sense of hope. The new girl had found her place in the world, and in doing so, she had helped someone else find theirs.